Welcome to Driving Cultural Relevance with Dr. Akumbu, bringing you culturally relevant, multifaceted conversations and reflections intersecting education, entertainment, and business with a commitment to DEIB and cultural capacity building. I am Dr. Ruth Vitsemmo Akumbu, and today I will reflect on culture and dressing. My hair is the death of me. This episode is dedicated to Mahsah Amini, the Iranian woman that was killed because of a lack of hair covering. I believe that evolution in culture is not always a bad thing. So it is based on this belief that I invite you to listen to the rest of the episode. Let me start with a little story. As a young woman, I associated a lot with a conservative church. And even though the church was very conservative, they gave us a lot of room to explore issues in our culture and in our environment that were constantly changing. A few of the issues were wearing pants, women wearing pants, women coming to church without a hair covering, and men not removing their hats when they're in the church. So those are some of the three things I remember as a young girl engaging in debates with other young people about. When it came to pants, there was not a definite conclusion, but there was a common sense agreement that there are situations where wearing pants was the safest thing to do. For me, I had to wear pants a lot growing up because at the age of 13, I was living somewhere very far away from home, and traveling home in a skirt was not always the most comfortable way to travel. So I chose to wear pants, which I also received that freedom after the debate, because it ended up being a personal decision. The youth group decided that there are some things that are going to come down to your relationship with God, the reason why you do what you do. And only you know the why behind some of the things that you are doing. So if a woman is going to choose to wear pants, the why is her reason. And if she were to stand before God, she would say, I wore pants because she'll give the why. So there's some things that, even though the church encouraged that women come to church with a dress on or dress in the African female attire, it was not a demand. It was not, you couldn't come in and worship God because you were wearing pants. So I was grateful as a young woman to have the freedom to wear whatever I needed to wear, knowing the reason why I was wearing what I was wearing. I remember after that conversation, I encountered a few missionaries that were American, and they tried to rebuke me for wearing pants. I was wearing pants on one of my long trips, and I was gonna hitch a ride with them, and they frowned upon that. I later found out that when they were in the United States, they wore pants. They even wore swimsuits at the beach. So I never listened to them because I had already discussed that in a church environment, a spiritual environment, and determined the why behind some of my dressing. So I ignored, I did ignore them, but I basically said, no, I will continue to wear pants. I was at peace with wearing pants. Not to even mention when I found out later the slight hypocrisy in them wanting me to dress a certain way, meanwhile they would dress a certain way when they were in their environment, in the US environment. So I understand context. I understand that the culture, there's just some things in the culture that were not as common. But culture is constantly changing and people are doing things differently because of different reasons. And sometimes it is between them and their God. So it's hard. If they had tried to expel me from the church because I wore pants, that would have been on them, because that was between me and my God, and I knew there was nothing wrong that I was doing. So I titled this Culture and Dressing, My Hair is the Death of Me. Basically, that part, My Hair is the Death of Me, is just to honor Mahsah Amini, because her hair became the death of her. She wanted to exercise the freedom to wear her hair the way she wanted without a hair covering in a culture that highly frowned upon that behavior, and lost her life because of it. So as a Black woman, we all know stories about hair, and all Black women listening to me know the pain that it goes into hair. I can spend 2 days working on my hair alone based on the style I wanted to create with my hair. So for Black women to wear wigs, sometimes it's not because they do not love their hair, but because it just is a lot of work to do your hair. And if you want to pay, it's costly to get your hair done every 2 weeks, let alone every weekend. So between the time and the money, Black hair is it can be such a challenge, but it is such a joy because we get to do so many things with it. When I just came to the United States, I cut my hair short and people thought, oh, it's exotic. Oh, look, it's beautiful. I stood out because I had short afro. And I went to work in the entertainment industry with that hair. I remember when they were casting African movies, they would always cast me because I had a short afro. And yeah, of course, I'm from Africa. My origins are African. So I basically had worked a lot with my short afro. But what was funny to me was that when I was in Cameroon, I didn't have short hair. So it seems to be a myth that because you're African, you're going to have shaved hair or short hair. No, I did have short hair. I had very long hair. I braided my hair every weekend because I was that girl who wanted to go to school with hair. Yes, some schools do not allow girls to go with hair, to have hair, because it just takes a lot of work. It's not because they don't love the hair, it's because it's so much work and time. So instead of spending weekends doing hair, the teachers prefer you spend the weekend doing homework. So they would just make a blanket rule, cut your hair. In other areas, you can keep your hair. And I was fortunate to be in an area where I could keep my hair. So But I had to do the work. I couldn't show up to school with dirty hair. I had to do the work every weekend. After I did all my chores, I did my homework, I did the housework, I had to do my hair. It didn't matter what time. I had to do my hair to get ready for school on Monday. And if I was lucky to have somebody to help me, I could keep that style for 2 weeks. And if I was very, very lucky to have somebody to spend hours and hours and hours to put in braids, I could keep that hair for like a month. But overall, hair is so much work for Black women that when we are in a business environment, it's easier for us to wear wigs. It's just easier. You throw a few cornrows underneath and you put on your wig. That way you don't invest so much time on hair and so much money on hair, especially if you're working a job that doesn't pay well. If I have to do my hair for $100 to $200 every weekend, and I'm only making $500, how am I going to pay my bills? I cannot pay my bills if I'm making $500 a week and I have to spend $200 or even $100 on hair every week. So I buy a $50 wig or I buy a $100 wig. And when I'm absolutely generous, I buy a $200 wig and I keep that wig for at least 6 months. And that is my saving grace. All I have to do now is wash the hair underneath and cornrow it, which would take me maybe 3 to 4 hours every weekend or every other weekend. So me wearing wig is not because I do not love my hair. It's because it's just not time and financially feasible to always keep my real hair out. And secondly, it's a way for me to preserve it. To preserve my hair. If I'm constantly tampering with my hair, it breaks quickly. It just Black hair is, they call it kinky hair, but it's fragile too. You got to treat it with love if you want to keep a certain length, if you want to have keep it healthy, you have to treat it with love. And sometimes keeping it under a wig with or weave is a good way to preserve it. That way I'm not constantly tugging on it and breaking it. So with all of that, in my culture, I do wear hair scarves. And hair scarf, sometimes it's for church. Sometimes I don't wear it for church. Like I had mentioned earlier, it's a personal decision now in most churches, whether you wear a hair scarf or not. So or you wear a hat, whatever you want to do. So for me, I wear hair scarves sometimes, not necessarily for church, just because I like the look of the hair scarf. Some of my hair scarves are just pretty. So I like to wear a hair scarf. But I generally will not wear a hair scarf to work. I haven't been in an environment where it's been created in a way where I can wear my hair scarf to work. But I must say that it's starting to change. I'm starting to go to job sites and see women with beautiful hair scarves, like done nicely, wrapped really well, not over the top like a Nigerian woman going to church on Sunday with those big hair scarves where you sit behind them and you can't see anything in front of you. Not that. Like appropriate, nice hair coverings or nice hair scarves. And people with Islamic background or Muslim background, I see a lot of them at different levels in their work with hair scarf. And it's a great culture. It's great to let the people know that they are free to have a hair scarf, to be able to wear their hair in a way that looks neat and nice, but at the same time helps them continue in a daily life at work without feeling the pressures of trying to fit in or trying to look like everyone or trying to feel like they don't belong if their hair is not a certain way. So if I should show up tomorrow, I work with my hair threaded the way I thread my hair, but it's nice and neat. I'm very comfortable in it. I love it. And it's not offensive to anybody. I don't see how. So I would think that you would want me to show up looking in an appropriate way that makes me feel good about myself without wasting a lot of hours. But wouldn't it be really cool though if my job would just pay me an extra $100 every month, just for, not even every month, every month, every 2 weeks to get my hair done. If they don't think that me wearing a scarf or doing my hair a certain way is appropriate, don't you think it would really be cool if they would just give me an extra $100 on my paycheck to just take care of my hair? If you don't like it, just pay for it. And I'll be happy to bring you very beautiful styles every other week or every weekend. No, not every weekend, it's too much time. Every other week. But what I'm saying is I do not want to be stereotyped or put in a mold that because I'm African, I need to have a short hair that is like the one that Wakanda warriors, or that I need to wear an afro. Or I don't want other Black people because now Black hair is becoming trendy. All of a sudden, as I get criticized because I'm wearing wigs. We need to find a balance and understand the struggle that goes into a woman's hair and why they do what they do with their hair. So going back to this tragic situation, it is unfortunate that she had to die because of her hair, because she didn't have a hair covering. It's unfortunate. I've been wondering why did she, knowing the culture in which she's in, decide to go about without the hair covering or without the appropriate hair covering? Are there other women like her that are trying to change the culture by going around with that hair covering, and she just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time and got picked up and then lost her life? Could she have just worn her hair covering to avoid this? Was she political and this was her way of making a statement? There's just so many questions. And it's easy to say that somebody understands the culture, they should not have done what they did, or that she understood the culture and should not have gone around without her hair scarf or her hair covering or the hijab. It's easy to say that. But at the same time, she's gone now and we can't talk to her to understand why. Why did she choose to do this? It is interesting that with her death and the death of other women, because of not wearing the hijab or because of other cultural issues and dressing, that this community have no choice but to confront, just as I confronted with a bunch of youth, the values or the culture that the church was enforcing. Once we had discussed, we went back to our leaders and we shared with them what the conclusions were. And that was that. I was fortunate to be in a community that was willing to evolve, not drastically. I wasn't going to start wearing miniskirts to church, but they evolved a bit to give us the freedom as Christian women to make a decision on our hair and our clothing. And every single young woman in the church, you could see that they still had a ton of respect they still had a ton of respect regarding what they wore to church or how they wore their hair to church. Because we had the freedom didn't mean that we were disrespectful of the culture. So there's a lot of people that do not necessarily do things out of disrespect. So it is possible that the military or whoever picked the cultural police or the hijab police or whatever you want to call these people, the people that picked her up, it is possible that they don't realize that people who do not wear the hijab are not trying to disrespect the culture. It's just that things are changing and they feel comfortable dressing the way they're dressing. So evolution in culture is not always a bad thing, but the storm traditionalists are always going to push back and fight back. And then people are going to push back and fight back. And then there's going to be loss of life. Instead of sitting down and having a conversation about where the culture is headed, how the culture is evolving, and why it is evolving, and why sometimes it is better to keep up with the times. I love culture, don't get me wrong. I love culture, and I love to see cultural elements preserved. But I also understand if a culture is detrimental, then maybe it's a culture that I need to move away from. If my culture say kill this person, I need to move away from that culture because now it's taking away human life. Anytime a culture is at the point where a life has to be destroyed because of that culture, the people in that culture need to rethink that culture. The Quran, from what I understand, actually says that women should dress modestly. It doesn't say that women should wear a hijab. Hijab appears to be how a group considers, one group considers what modesty is. And it's common across societies. One group can look at modesty as one thing, and the other group can look at modesty as another thing. And going back to my story about missionaries telling me not to wear pants, but they come to the US and they wear shorts, long pants, I mean, and then they come to the US and they wear shorts and they wear swimsuits on the beach. It's also based on the culture. In my culture, you don't see people walking around in swimsuits. I grew up on the mountains. There's just nobody on the mountains hanging out, tanning in swimsuit. No. So based on the cultural context, they were trying to enforce something based on the culture, based on their understanding of the culture, without also realizing that as an individual, I have my own reasons why I would do something that would be slightly different from what my culture does. And it's not because I am purposely trying to disrespect my culture or make somebody else feel uncomfortable, but it's because that is the best I can do at that time based on the situation in which I am in, or based on my beliefs and my values. Not saying that respecting blanket culture is bad, but saying that sometimes, again, the why is more important than just a blanket culture. Understanding why somebody's doing something at the very time, it's really important. It's very, very important. As far as culture, dressing, and hair and all of it is concerned, it's important to know the why. Killing this young lady, whether it was on purpose or it's by accident, trying to discipline her and it led to her death, whatever happened in that situation, her death is only going to play negatively against the current culture. When we do not handle changes in a certain way, we only push people to turn against that culture. When we disagree with how somebody's living their life and try to force them or try to push them to respect our culture or live the way we want them to live, the moment they have the opportunity, they're going to break away and they're going to sometimes be even vindictive and try to destroy your culture or destroy that culture. So as we try to empower people and pass on our cultural values from generation to generation, or try to bring in our cultural values in organizations, in communities, in schools, in classrooms, it is important to always remember that these cultural values will not always be accepted exactly how we practice them. I love when I meet Nigerian young people because some of them are still very respectful. They still carry that high respect for their elders, the way they address their elders, the way they greet their elders, the way they talk to their elders. They still have a lot of respect. But I'm not going to stereotype everybody that is from that culture as in, why are you not behaving this way or this way? This is the culture, you need to behave this way. Because again, culture is evolving and people are evolving. I wish some of these things about our culture that we love so much will stay stagnant. I wish they would stay stagnant, but that's not the truth. They're not going to stay stagnant. For many, many reasons, these things are going to change. And we need to be flexible to the changes that are coming. We need to be flexible to the diversity that our society is going to be we need to be flexible to the diversity that diverse peoples are bringing into our communities. We just need to be flexible to all our own cultural beliefs, even if we are of the same skin color, even if we're of the same people group, we still need to be open to changes that are going to be happening in our culture due to globalization or due to education, due to what? Just how the world is changing in any other way other than globalization and education, of course. So I might be going around and round and round, but my whole point in this episode is just to say that we should consider the why behind people's culture, their dressing, the way they carry themselves, the things they do, the things they say, how people say things, how people dress, how people wear their hair. We should consider the why behind it. And if people in our community are starting to have different whys, then we should also be flexible and respectful of their choice to move away from the culture that we all hold dear. Evolution in culture is not always a bad thing. And evolution in culture is absolutely necessary if that culture needs for people to die for it to exist. So I find it interesting that the CNN anchor that was going to interview the Iranian president who was here in the United States to attend the UN meetings was stood up, right? Was stood up. She was asked to wear a headscarf for that meeting. I am sure that if she was in Iran, she would wear her headscarf and she would dress in the way that was respectful of the culture there. She's in the US. I wonder though, if it was asked of her nicely, will you please wear a headscarf just as a sign of respect and honor for the leader of this country? Because in the country, a hijab is what women usually wear, and we would just ask that you throw on a headscarf. Will you please wear a headscarf? If she had said no, she would still be within her rights, because in the country where she's in the context, in the local context in which she's in, she does not have to wear a headscarf. She does not have to wear a hijab. And if you as a leader is coming to somebody's country and you want to be part of the global landscape, then you also have to be flexible on the demands you put on others. If she doesn't want to wear a hijab, or she's not even a headscarf, not even a hijab, because that would be a little bit too far. She doesn't want to wear a headscarf to the meeting, which is taking place in her home. It's like you coming into my home and trying to dictate to me what I should do in my home. You could say, oh, these are some of the things we do, and would you consider it? If I would love to consider it, I would do it. Like some people would wear an African clothing to an event that is African that I'm hosting in the United States, out of pride or support of my culture, or just to say, I support you, or I support your culture, or they would do it as a sign of respect for me or honor for me. But I will never demand that somebody wears an African attire, and if they don't have an African attire, I can associate with them in a country or in a context where I don't even need to do that, or where it's not required. That anchor was in her home. That space was her space and her home. And all you can do is ask nicely. And if she says no, then you still go ahead and do the interview. But if you don't want to do the interview, then that's okay. So it almost seems like accepting to do the interview and then refusing to do the interview seems like, because there was so much riot and you knew you were going to be asked about this issue, you decided that all of a sudden, let's look for an excuse. If we tell her not to wear a hairstyle, she's going to say no, and then we can have an excuse not to honor our word and come to the table and have this interview like we had promised. So it seemed like an excuse to get out of the interview. Yet again, I've wondered to myself, if I were in the anchor's shoes, would I have worn the hijab, not the hijab, I keep saying hijab, they wore the headscarf just to have this interview and ask the president what he was going to do about the death of this young lady, or ask the president how he was going to adjust the culture so that people are not dying because the definition of modesty have changed. So I almost feel like if I was in her shoe, I would have worn the headscarf just to have the opportunity to ask very tough questions about what is going on with the situation, with the death of this young lady. But again, I respect her. I respect her view or her position of saying, this is my home, and you're not going to make me do what your culture requires, not my culture, your culture requires. You're not going to impose upon me what you want. Impose upon me your culture. So I understand that too. I completely understand her putting her foot down and saying, this is my home, and you're not going to tell me how to run my house, or how to behave in my home, or how to live in my home, or impose your values on me in my home. So I completely understand and also respect that. And I also respect the president for saying, I'm not going to come because my culture requires this. You're not going to do it. I'm not going to put myself in a situation where I feel disrespected. I also respect that. I respect him for saying, this is what I would like. And if you cannot do it, then I'm not going to do it, because I need to honor my culture, and his beliefs is part of his identity. And he doesn't want to go contrary to his identity, to who he is, to his core belief, to what makes him who he is. And if what makes him who he is, for better or worse, is for a woman to wear a headscarf, then that's what makes him who he is, for better or for worse. So two people now with two different cultures are in a stalemate, and nothing got done because of a hair scarf. People die because of a hair scarf. So her hair was the death of her. Her hair was the death of her because of her culture. That is extremely unfortunate. That is extremely unfortunate. Culture, evolution in culture is not always a bad thing. Evolution in culture is not always a bad thing. And if I have to die for your culture to exist, then your culture needs to evolve. If you have to kill me for your culture to exist, then your culture needs to evolve. If my culture has to die for your culture to exist, then your culture must evolve. If my culture has to die for your culture to exist, then your culture must evolve. Let's think on these things. Let's reflect on them. And let's see how we can make a better world where we do not destroy life because of a cultural belief or a culture that is defined slightly differently from our past generations used to think it should be. Thank you.